Hi, it's Don Southerton and our weekly episode of Everything Korea. This week's topic, and as we like to jump right into things, August 17th, Korean Succession, a commentary and FAQ. It's hard not to be a watchdog for Korean-facing issues that grow in concern and could potentially have a global impact on the organizations and clients that I support, like you. Every morning I monitor things, every day I look at, constantly analyze, digest, pull apart, and deconstruct for you. In an interview for an upcoming segment for the Korean media show Koreascape, where I'm talking on globalization, I was also asked for my opinion on the recent drama with Lotte. And Lotte is Korea's fifth largest Chaebol, and the controversy is over control of the group. The Koreascape host, Kurt Asian, a seasoned journalist, shared concern over the bold move by one of the founder's sons to take control of the group, which has drawn considerable media attention and popular notice on the ongoing issue of Korean succession across and among all the Chaebol in Korea. This media attention, and the reason I'm talking about it this week and really putting it sort of on a high priority, this media attention not only has been limited to Korea, but it showed up on page 1 of the Wall Street Journal, as well as an AP and many of the other leading wire and global news services. So it expanded well beyond the Korean media to a global attention. In fact, just over the weekend I was looking at a weekend recap in the paper, and it was an article in there. By the way, Lotte is Korea's largest retail, distribution, tourism, construction group. They have a growing international presence, annual sales upward to about 100 million. Also, for those of you who are not familiar with the term, Chaebol is a common South Korean term used for the conglomerates. Most often these are multinational, global enterprises led at the peak of the organization by a chairman, and in most instances family control. So it's a generic term used in Korea quite often. This brings us to the media summary on the topic of Korean family succession, as well as my FAQ where I share some thoughts. To prefix my comments today, in her book, How to Tell Your Story So the World Listens, Babette Buster, author and USC adjunct professor, notes, and I quote, "It has been said the industrial age ended after the end of World War II. Then it was superseded by the age of information via the computer, the 1960s boom in Madison Avenue advertising, and television. Then with the internet boom of the 1990s, followed in 2003 with a viral explosion of social media." So what do we have? With this is a new deceiving conceit arose. Anything worth knowing is available at our fingertips. And she further says, this immediacy has curiously made people less curious about discovering the world, at least to any depth. The author then points out, we often know the facts, but not the context in which they happen. And as most of you know, my work is showing context. So let's start with what we know, and specifically fueling so much concern, and then I will share some context in an FAQ. An editorial on the Lotte controversy in Yonhap, and Yonhap is Korean's leading newswire service. The writer there sums up popular sentiment in Korea. And he says, Koreans are sick and tired of this intercedient fights when the managerial control of the Chaebol moves between generations. More so, who will succeed a family decision rather than a formal stockholders meeting? Fueling this fire, in July, amid considerable media attention, Samsung C&T, that's Construction and Trade, and Chaebol Industries, another of the Samsung divisions, agreed to an $8 billion merger that essentially consolidated the Samsung Group's Lee family sway over their flagship Samsung Electronics. This move sparked the concern and anger of activist shareholder Paul Singer, who is CEO of the U.S. hedge fund Elliott Associates. The American firm publicly felt the deal would undervalue the substantial stock holdings they had in Samsung C&T while overvaluing Chaebol to the benefit of the Lee family and the succession there. Samsung rallied their supporters to win over Elliott in a very heated public vote. Noting this, I have prepared a 3-point FAQ to look at context behind the Korean succession, past and present. So please stay with me on this. So first FAQ, what's driving the Korean family succession issue? Well, if I was to look back on this, the Korean Chaebol model is strongly rooted in their past. Neo-Confucianism, which is sort of the Korean version of Confucianism, in that the dominant secular ideology of the country, going back to 1392, so well over 600 years, required all government officials and bureaucrats to pass rigid civil service examinations for local, provincial, and court positions. The Korean monarchy, this is where it gets interesting, was the exception. Male-led succession was used to determine the next ruler. Likewise, in Korean families, the eldest son and his descendants take precedence over siblings and their descendants. Elder sons take precedence not only over their younger sons, but sons take precedence over daughters, even elder daughters. With the modern era, the end of Japanese colonial rule, Korean business groups evolved. Family run, they gained considerable momentum during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. All this was under state-run policies mandated by the government. At times there was a love-hate relationship between the groups, this Chaebol groups, and the government, usually over transfer of family wealth becoming an issue when the founders of these groups moved to the second generation. It's really sparked a lot. It's when we see the first controversies. Following Korean traditional Confucian norms that dictated the eldest son be granted control over the family holdings as the next patriarch, in some cases, as with Samsung and Hyundai, a sibling or relative other than the eldest was selected by the founder. In some instances, the elder siblings fell out of favor with the founders, while in other cases, a younger son assumed the role following the death of an elder son, or if there was no son, a relative could take over. Now, question 2. How is the recent merger at Samsung associated with succession? This is where it gets a little bit more complicated. In the recent merger of Samsung, a second set of issues really involves what we call wealth transfer. And this centers on inheritance taxation. And there's a tax in Korea that's levied to up to 50% of a patriot's assets. To avoid this heavy tax, de facto holding companies allowed the second generation to gain control from the first generation. And they did this with marginal investment and little direct inheritance from the patriarch. As we're now moving into the third generation, groups like Samsung and Hyundai Motor have engaged in very lengthy and well-orchestrated fiscal moves to transfer wealth and control. Much of this is through merging groups within the larger group, gaining control with investments of monies at a very low level. So they invest very small in a company, and then that's merged and they can gain greater control. There's also a second method called work funneling. I've written content in here and you can read a lot about that. So number 3, noting public sentiment regarding succession, how likely is it for South Korean President Park Geun-hye to toughen corporate laws? Well, this is the big concern. As I noted above, there's been a long-time love-hate relationship between the Chaebol and government. Despite the Chaebol's dominance and influence, they have become increasingly under pressure from new laws and regulations designed to increase financial transparency and accountability above the family members. For instance, the government recently enacted a deemed inherited tax so families can't get around some of the laws. They've also done a lot of things to tighten requirements and reporting internal transactions. This said, at a time when the Korean sluggish economy is a priority for the current administration, I feel President Park will not lash out against the groups. They will exert pressures to resolve family differences, and I see succession plans for Samsung and for Hyundai moving forward. Though I believe that there will be more with the possibility that they want to try to draw as little attention as possible. So to conclude this week, and it's been a long broadcast, but we have a lot of content. To conclude, as a colleague expressed recently, that for the succession plans still in the works, their transitions may come late in the cycle. As others bring attention to this issue, transitions that need to be made that must and will occur from the current and aging leadership to the next generation will get more legal focus and public scrutiny. So what does this mean? Focus and resources for the group's leadership that they should have on running their business will be redirected to dealing with succession issues. Decisions impacting the global organizations could be delayed, as well as the approval process, which often requires a very high level of sign-off. So if you have a question or comment, please feel free to jump in here. I've got my linking system where you can set up for an appointment, or you can just direct the questions to me. I also have a link to the Buster book on writing stories. So until next time, this is Don Southerton wishing you all the best.